So it's a pleasure today to be talking to Irfan Latif of DLD College London. So Irfan, hello.
Hello, Helen, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you very much.
It's lovely to speak to you again. So tell us a little bit more about DLD. Now, I know you could speak for ages about DLD, so I shall limit you on that. You're very, very fond of your school. But so a little bit about DLD, but also particularly about your involvement in the wider independent sector, and you're involved in promoting diversity as well, aren't you? So talk to us.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, of course, DLD was first established back in 1931 by Messrs. Davis, Lang and Dick, and it's affectionately known now as DLD. I took up the reins back in 2018, January, where the school had moved in 2015 to its present site in Westminster. It had been in various areas in Belgravia, Notting Hill, Marylebone, but now it's found its home, I suppose, in just opposite the Houses of Parliament in Westminster. We're a 14 to 19 independent boarding school, and we have about sort of 450 odd students with some 200 odd boarding on site. And we have a wide range of students from all over the world. Our biggest intake is from the UK, but we have a boarding facility which has been said by many people as a future of boarding and what boarding schools will look like. We're not a typical parochial country boarding school. We're right in the heart of the city, and we use the city, London in this case, as our classroom. And it's quite amazing to see how we have adapted to being in the city and using all its facilities and being able to provide those students with those unique learning opportunities for them to develop into global citizens. So yeah, it's a good fun and great place to be, and I've been very, very fortunate to be involved with the likes of Julie Robinson and Sally Ann Huang of the ISC and HMC in looking at how to promote diversity and inclusion within the independent sector. We all know what happened back in the summer of last year with the George Floyd, and then of course with Tiwa Adebayo writing to the independent schools about how structural racism and racism was rife in our sector, and so we needed to do something about it. And I suppose we have been working on this for a long time, but I suppose the George Floyd incident and incidents around that highlighted that we need to do something in our sector. So Julie Robinson and myself set up the Inclusion and Diversity Group through the ISC, and that worked across all of the associations. BSA, HMC, GSA, AGBIS, and it's great bringing all of those associations into place and looking at how we can ensure that the next generation of students don't have to face structural racism within our institutions. I think.
So what are you doing? I mean, what's the plan? I mean, what's the planned outcome?
All the various sectors, various points within our sector, and how we can go about modifying and changing them. So we're looking at recruitment and the promotion of diversity within governors. And so that's a really good place to start. We're looking at staff training and how we can ensure that there's a consistency in staff training amongst all the associations. Looking at legal issues, dealing with allegations, racism, things like that. It's looking at school policies and including diversity and inclusion as part of our policy, and how does that look in schools and how does that feel? Not just a tick box, but what does it actually look like and what should it look like? It's looking at the curriculum and school culture, and I think HMC and GSA are working on that to see how we can reflect the curriculum now to reflect the needs of the 21st century learner in light of the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. And of course, the language. Language is a huge barrier for many. Some feel uncomfortable using the language. Some feel that they may put their foot in it. I'm not a particular fan of BAME. That puts me into a category straight away, and we shouldn't be putting people into categories or boxing them up. So it's looking at how we can change the language around inclusion and diversity so everyone feels included.
I mean, you're absolutely speaking my language there when you're talking about that. As I was writing recently about diversity and how people can often just think, well, it's a tick box or it's something we've got to say. We put categories, and actually, physically, people often do have to name themselves as categories on forms, and yet. Diversity is something glorious and wonderful. I mean, my perspective on it is that diversity is something that we create by being different from, similar to, but different from other people. So to have diversity, you don't just have one person who is diverse, because it's like diverse from what? What, the normal that we all think that should be the right thing? But this is like diversity because we create, when we bring two people together with different perspectives, you created that diversity, and by through communication, through not being afraid to test out, to ask, that's how we get different views. That's one of the things that I feel strongly about diversity on boards, actually, as well, to have different perspectives around the table. So what's the plan? Are you going to be making recommendations, or is this a process? I mean, don't expect this to be a tick that all done that.
No,
certainly don't expect that.
No, it's more of a cultural thing, and how we go about changing the culture of schools so that people do feel part of the fabric of that school. And it's interesting to see. I'm only one of 3 BAME heads running a boarding school in the UK. There's some 500 odd around the UK. There's only 3 of them. Some people will argue, well, there's not many BAME teachers who aspire to headship, but there are many. There are plenty.
So why is that then? I mean, is that just because the people haven't been encouraged? Is that because there is that sense of when they're being appointed that people say, oh yeah, not one of us? I mean, what is it?
I think it's difficult to pinpoint, Helen, but I think it is. There are wider issues there. I think there's an issue of possibly cultural, teaching seen as a profession within those communities. It's looking at how or what barriers are in place. If you we've heard this so many times now. If I can't be if I can't see.
Yes.
And if we,
it's a lot harder.
I've been very fortunate in my career where I have worked with heads who are very open and governing bodies who are very progressive. I was the first head of any colour in the Southwest. And so, to be amongst that group and to have had a governing body who were very, very supportive, not only for what I could deliver in the school, but my background, etc., and looked beyond that, was very refreshing, especially in the southwest of England, where it is quite monochromatic. It is the cultural norm is very, very different to a cosmopolitan area such as London and the big cities. And so for me, it was very it was an opportunity to change perceptions. And of course, prior to that, I was in an all-boys boarding school, and again, I was the first deputy head of academic of any colour to be part of that. And now I run the Alpha Plus Group's flagship school, a person of colour. And I think those institutions, those heads, those governing bodies see beyond colour. And that's what we need to do. So I've been very, very fortunate, but others haven't been. And it's looking at how we can change the cultures of those particular institutions, groups of schools, individual schools, etc., to see beyond that. How do we encourage more BAME staff to apply for senior leadership? How do we get more BAME staff to come into schools like ours? Are there cultural barriers there already which prevent them from applying, and so they apply elsewhere? So what are we doing as a sector in order to encourage more of that and to be more open and transparent?
That feels like a huge opportunity for the independent sector over the next few years. And what would you say to that? And what other opportunities are there for the independent sector in the UK over the next few years?
I think the most important thing for the independent sector now is looking at how it responds to COVID. And that's a huge response. I know that schools, including mine, have responded very well. I suppose because we have the resources in order to do that. And unfortunately, the divide has increased between the state and the independent sector. And as a result, that has caused issues, but independent schools have worked really, really hard over this past year in order to provide our students with some form of continuity. It's been difficult, it's been tough, it hasn't been ideal, but schools have really dug deep, and staff have been incredible in how they've responded in terms of upskilling, in terms of understanding new technology, in terms of changing their pedagogy and how they deliver education, not only from an academic point of view, but also from a pastoral point of view. How do we support support our students? Because we know as soon as schools come back, there's going to be a tsunami, a wave of mental health issues. How do we ensure that we continue to support our students online by providing support that they need in order for them to overcome these issues of, isolation and being on their own and working remotely? These things are going to be difficult and need to be addressed. There is going to be a huge gulf. There's going to be a huge gulf in terms of education and the attainment gap. There's also going to be a gulf now in terms of mental health, and how do we support those children? There's going to be huge challenges for the independent sector. I think many schools are going to continue with some form of online, hybrid, blended learning, whatever you want to call it. That's going to remain. I think there's going to be challenges now with regards to finances. The TPS now is going to be coming to sharper focus, including how we deal with the ravages of the pandemic and testing, because that's not being funded for independent schools. So that will need to be included in our budget if we continue to adopt the COVID measures that we have in place. And there's lots of things now which are going to affect the independent sector, and that may, as a result, increase fees. And by increasing fees, you now exclude another demographic from our pool, if you like, which means then we may rely heavily on the international market. The international market now may see the UK in a different light in terms of our response to the pandemic. And there may well be arguments on how well we responded or how badly we responded to the pandemic. And so all those need to be taken into consideration and provide confidence, not only to our domestic market, our UK market, but also the wider international market, to continue to champion how brilliant British education is and how we have coped with the pandemic. Yes, it has been difficult, but I think the vaccine rollout has shown that we can do this to restore confidence, not only within the UK, but also within all the myriad of industries that are around: the entertainment industry, the education industry, finance industry, health industry, etc. And so they're going to be huge challenges going forward. But I think together, working collaboratively, we will be able to get through this.
So if you were to take a crystal ball and you were to look 5 years into the future in the UK independent sector, what would you be seeing, do you think?
I think the value of human connection is going to be the most important thing now. We all value that. I think the working from home now has lost its novelty. Tommy, it certainly has lost its novelty. I think that human connection is going to be premium. And so you are going to get various business models now where you're going to have an online version. We've seen the likes of Harrow Online, we've seen the likes of Portland Place Online. All of those are coming online, and they're going to be more affordable alternatives to our parents and our customers. And so I think that's going to be more and more part and parcel of what we do going forward. I think there's going to be an appreciation of community now. And I think inclusion and diversity is going to come into much sharper focus, and how we as a society need to address those problems within our sector, and how the pandemic has accelerated that. And I think the workings of the ISC and working with the various groups within the independent sector and how we frame inclusion and diversity is going to be huge going forward. And I'm very privileged to be part of that, and formulating policy and shaping how inclusion and diversity looks in our schools is going to be really, really important. And of course, things like the online learning, how independent schools are going to further disrupt the market. And I think that is going to further look at how our curriculum and how our offering is going to diversify, looking diversity at a different angle. And that's going to give more options to parents as a result of how varied our options are. I would love to go back to a norm, and I think the vaccine will help. But I think there will be things like, social distancing, wearing masks on public transport. That is just going to become the norm. We've seen a 95% decrease in the incidence of flu over this period. We've hardly seen any hospitalizations for actual winter flu. And so, the washing of hands, the wearing of masks and the social distancing have all helped. And maybe we need to be a bit more thoughtful of that in the way we act on an everyday basis, and how we keep ourselves safe from a disease point of view, and how we can reduce the pressure on things like the NHS and our doctors, who are doing an absolutely fantastic job. We were fortunate during the pandemic, and that we became a beacon of hope, if you like, in the centre of London. You can see behind me, that's DLD in all its finery.
I recognise it, yes.
Loads and loads of windows there. And so when the Rainbow for the Nightingale campaign began, thousands of pictures were being sent, drawn in by pupils, drawn by artists from all over the world, were being sent into the NHS, and the NHS could not, due to infection rates, etc., could not accept those. So our boarding community said, look, we'll take them. They already had started painting and drawing pictures and putting them up in the windows, thanking the NHS. We've got St Thomas's right
just a stone's throw away. Yes.
And so all of those pictures, we then said we'll take them, and then we covered from top to bottom our windows with all the gratitude and thanks for all the help that the NHS are doing, and that was picked up by the world media. And how we have responded to the pandemic, and how we're working with our NHS partners, in particular the Evelina Children's Hospital and St Thomas's. And it was heartening to see. And our campaign became part of the Heads Up campaign of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge as well. So it was, although it was a difficult time for us all, we could see, silver linings that what we could do together as a community, as a sector, as a country, pulling together our resources for the better of society. So it was an interesting time, and it will continue to be an interesting time as we continue to navigate this very difficult and challenging time. But there will be opportunities for us to
and I love that picture you're painting of the future, into the future. That's my kind of future. It's more diverse. It's building on all these opportunities. It's more equal. It's best of humanity. That's what we want. And on that note, we shall leave it for today. But thank you so much, Irfan. Thank you. It's lovely to speak with you again.
You too, Helen. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.